Okay, I'd like to call to order the Bedford Township Planning Commission regular meeting. It is January 11, 2023. It is 7 o'clock p.m. Item number 2 will stand for to do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, item 4 is that time of year, election of Planning Commission officers for 2023. At this point, we'll nominate and vote on a new chairman, a vice chairman, and a secretary. So we'll start with the chairman position. Does anybody have a nomination?
I make a nomination of Tom Coverett for chair.
You accept?
Thank you. I appreciate that. And if that's the desire of the commission, I would be honored to serve in that capacity. So yes, I accept.
I'll second the motion. Mr. Coverett, can you call the roll? You are still the secretary.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm sorry, we just have to ask that there's no further nominations.
Okay. Any other nominations? Okay. Seeing none, can you call the roll?
Mr. Steiner.
Aye.
Mr. Mahoney.
Aye.
Mr. Andrews.
Aye.
Mr. Lamkowski.
Aye.
Mr. Helm.
Aye.
Mr. Fritz.
Aye.
And I vote aye.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. Should I pass the gavel now or just go through the...
Yep, pass the gavel now, and then we'll move forward with
It's all
the
yours,
vice chair.
Mr. Coverett.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Item number 4, we just covered. Item number 5, approval of the
We
agenda.
have to elect vice and...
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Now you're acting
Thank
like
you.
me.
Yeah, see?
I'm rubbing off on you.
Looking for recommendations for vice chairman.
I'll make a nomination of Mr. Mahoney for vice chair.
I'll accept.
I'll second. Take time.
All right.
I said too early?
You second?
Yeah, second.
All right. Moved and supported. Any further nominations? Okay. Jody, can you take the roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Steiner,
Aye.
Mr. Fritz,
Aye.
Mr. Lamkowski,
Aye.
Mr. Andrews,
Aye.
Mr. Helm,
Aye.
Mr. Mahoney,
Aye.
and Mr. Coverett.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you. And one additional position to fill, secretary. So looking for nominations for the secretary.
Make a nomination of Mr. Lankowski.
I would accept that.
I'll second.
Okay. Moved and supported. Any further nominations? Okay. Jody, can you take the roll call, please?
Mr. Steiner,
Aye.
Mr. Helm,
Aye.
Mr. Andrews,
Aye.
Mr. Fritz,
Aye.
Mr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Lamkowski,
Aye.
and Mr. Coverett.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you.
And Mr. Lamkowski, you will take over tonight as secretary. If you would like assistance, I would be more than happy to help through the process.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. All right. Now we're moving on to item number 5, approval of the agenda.
I move we accept the agenda as listed.
I'll second.
Moved and supported. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? All right, agenda is passed. Item number 6, approval of the minutes of December 14th, 2022.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of December 14th, 22 as presented.
I'll second.
Moved and supported. Any further discussion? Okay, those in favor of approving the minutes of December 14th, 2022 signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? All right. Minutes are approved. Item number 7, public comment. Is there anyone from the public at this time who'd like to speak? Okay. Seeing that there are no comments at this time, we'll move on to item number 8 under new business. 8A, request for a sign waiver for Family Video 160, previously Family Video Store for Goodwill and a donation center in a C1 local business zoning district on parcel number 5802-027-009-10 otherwise known as 8167 Lewis Avenue, Temperance, Michigan 48182. Jody, can you walk us through, please?
Yes. Again, the applicant is Goodwill Industries, 8167 Lewis. Sign company is Fast Signs. JR Hoppenjans is their representative from Fast Signs. Contact is Keith Chapman. Parcel number 5802-027-00910, C1 local business. The applicant is requesting a sign waiver located on the corner of Lewis Avenue and Dean Road, previously the Family Video Store, where 2 wall signs are permitted. The parcel is zoned C1 local commercial zoning district. The applicant is seeking to install 2 quote-unquote bookstore wall signs to be located within the existing cabinets on the metal V awning on the front of the building on Lewis Avenue, each measuring 29.19 square feet in area and 1.93 feet in height. Per section 419.22 states in a C1 local zoning district, 1 wall sign with a maximum of 50 square feet in area is permitted where the building has at least 2 sides on each frontages faces a road, street, right-of-way. There may be 2 wall signs, 1 for each of the 2 sides of the building, and each may be the maximum size allowed for 1 wall sign. Therefore, the applicant is seeking a waiver to permit a second wall sign on Lewis Avenue in place of the wall sign permitted on Dean Road. The applicant is also requesting to replace the insert in the existing monument sign, which measures 97.75 square feet in area of signage and 23 square foot in area base, with an overall height of 10.5 feet. Per section 419.22 states 1 monument sign in a C1 local business district is permitted up to 50 square feet in area, plus 50 square feet of base of the structure, and an overall height of 7 feet. Therefore, the applicant is requesting a 3.5-foot height waiver and a 47.75 square foot area waiver to utilize the existing monument sign. On June 5, 2000, a wall sign variance was granted by the Board of Zoning Appeals to Family Video to allow for 2 wall signs on Lewis Avenue, as well as to allow the monument sign with other stipulations that was created from the non-conforming pylon sign, which was then brought into compliance. However, the variance was granted solely to Family Video, and therefore the applicant must request a sign waiver for the existing monument sign. The applicant is also requesting to install 8 book mural panels inserted into the existing light pillar located in the front of the store, which panel measures 8 feet in height and 20 square feet in area. Should the request be considered, the following waivers are required: to permit a second wall sign on Lewis Avenue in place of the permitted sign on Dean Road, a 3.5-foot height waiver for the monument sign, a 47.75 square foot area waiver for the monument sign, to permit 8 book mural panel inserts in the existing pillar light, each measuring 8 feet in height and 20 square feet in area. The following shall be considered for any inclusion in any motion to approve. A sign and electrical permit shall be obtained from Bedford Township should it be needed. Waiver granted for this specific use. The applicant shall continue to maintain the entire perimeter landscape of the base no less 2 feet wide, growing in a healthy condition, and the applicant shall continue to work with the township to ensure placement of the sign and all the requirements of the waiver. And I know this was discussed lengthy at the last meeting, and we worked with the applicant. They came in, and we desired to move forward with it for tonight's meeting to avoid any impediment in their opening of their business.
Okay. Thank you, Jody. I think last time we were a few members short, so we have a full commission tonight. So there you go. If you could state your name, address for the record, please.
Sure. Good evening. I'm JR Hoppenjans. I'm the owner of Fast Signs. We are at 15521 South Dixie in Monroe. I also have Keith Chapman with me.
And my address is 416 Ferguson Avenue, Adrian, Michigan.
Okay. Thank you. Any opening statements, anything you want to provide to the commission?
Keith volunteered to join us because there was some back and forth and some negotiations or some requests the board had, and I felt like with our modified request, having him present might facilitate, getting to a resolution this time. We've significantly modified the request as much as we could, so we appreciate your re-review of the situation.
Okay. Thank you. Is it Keith, you're the owner of the property, or?
No, Family Video owns the property. I'm with Goodwill Industries. I'm the president and CEO of Goodwill Industries, Southeastern Michigan. We're leasing the facility.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
And just for the record, in your packet information, you do have the authorization for them to speak on their behalf because they are leasing the building of the property.
Very good. Thank you. Let's open it up for discussion.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Steiner.
So going back and looking at the primary four things that we need here, at the last meeting where we discussed the mural sign, I think majority of the board, if not the entire board at that time, seemed to think that that would be okay as long as it was not a lighted sign, so the mural would not be an issue there. We had a lot of discussion over the signage on the building itself. Basically, you've reduced the intensity there by just working on the V sign. I think changing the name to bookstore instead of just more and more Goodwill signs, that probably helps there. Also, not doing anything on the Dean Road side as well. I guess the largest thing we need to look at is the height waiver and the square footage waiver on the monument. It's still pretty large, and I think that'll probably be our biggest point of discussion this evening. And I don't have a lot of additional comments over the last meeting on that sign. I mean, the rendering you've provided here, it looks like a decent sign. I'm going to defer to my fellow commission members here and let them add some discussion, and we'll go from there.
Just one thing to add, we've changed the name, we've also changed the color. The background of that color of that sign will be green, so it'll really match the cabinet, which is also green, and the awning, which is also the same color green.
Not that it makes a difference. Is it like a dark green, lime green?
It's a dark green. It's darker than the carpet on the
I
floor.
was figuring dark.
It's the family video green.
Yeah, since you said it was like the building, I was assuming at least that darker. Okay.
Yes.
And when you say change the color, are you referring to the monument sign or the wall signs?
Oh,
Or
okay,
both?
so that's our second point, is that since we've submitted this application and conversations with Goodwill, we are likely to change the color of the background of that Goodwill sign that's in front of you as well, from the Goodwill blue to the green, to the family video green. Correct. Yes, exactly like that.
If you can take a look at the rendering that actually has the labeling of the bookstore in the V, you can kind of see the background of it is a little bit of a green color.
It doesn't change the height or the size, it just kind of changes the appearance of the sign. And I do want to thank Jody. She called me on Monday morning of the day the application was due for you to tell me that it was due at noon. We got our act together and got it submitted by noon. Later in the afternoon, I had a conversation with Mr. Chapman. Let's change all the signs to green. So that's how we got to where we're at. Yes, thank you.
Jody and Katrina are good like that.
They are good like that. They've saved me now twice.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mahoney?
I drive by this sign frequently, and this morning I just can't help but notice that it isn't obnoxious, the size of it. I don't have an objection to the size of the sign. I think in the future we have to look at new requests and make sure we're staying within the ordinances as they are, but personally I don't have a problem with the sign and voting for a variance on that.
And I think that was the intent of the previous board's recommendation, that they approve the variance pending that it was still family video. So every time this property changes hands, it's an opportunity to relook at this and say, is it still appropriate? Does it cause undue hardship to the owner or leasee? And that's the evaluation point.
Well, it seems like it sits off the road quite a bit, so that makes it less obtrusive when it doesn't block vision of oncoming traffic, anything like that, in my opinion.
Mr. Lapkowski? No? Good. Yep. I'd like to kind of echo Rick, Mr. Steiner's comments. Thank you for coming back with a revised waiver request. And I would also agree, and I expressed this last time, the height, the size, looking for a 3.5-foot height waiver, which is basically, 50% over the allowable, asking for 2 times the allowable signage area under the ordinance. Those are big numbers. And again, as I expressed last time, thinking about precedent-setting decisions and who's next, Those are things that are going through my mind. I looked at the minutes, and there was a statement last time that the applicant would be willing to consider reducing the height on the monument sign, and it came back, as the original request. Was there any logic to not?
We did. We evaluated the cost of replacing that sign, making it compliant with the ordinance. It was about $17,000 to $22,000. We looked at the reason that some boards approve variances is because they create an undue hardship, an unnecessary hardship, an unnecessary expense. We're not trying to seek some commercial advantage or beat our competitors or something like that. That sign just exists. It's unfortunate that it was too big. It's a result of a different board and a different organization. We just don't want to burden Goodwill with that additional expense for 3 feet and that's why we're asking for the same thing. It's just a big expense.
Okay, thank you. Additional comments?
If it helps at all, we could raise the grade of the area around that sign and make this a 2 foot or 1.5 foot variance. Again, it's just another expense that we don't really want to incur.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Steiner?
So I guess you said potentially raise the grade. In other words, are you saying, bring the dirt up around it, the base, 1.5 foot, 2
Yes.
foot, whatever? Mr. Camprut, does that really suffice if that was even considered, or is that sort of putting a Band-Aid around the situation?
There may be a definition of where we measure from to the grade around the sign. I don't know as if that, it's kind of like fences, measuring the height of a fence. If you mount up on the base
Right.
of the fence, you're really artificially increasing the fence beyond the legal size. I don't know if Jody's going to be able to find that language where it's measured from.
And while she's looking at that, I'll just make a quick comment too, is you are correct when you talk about a different organization, which what is before planning is not a variance. This is a waiver, difference than variance, which was granted by the Board of Zoning Appeals. So there's 2 different types of situations.
Thank you for that clarification.
Go ahead,
And
Ms. Rector.
I knew it was in here, I just took me. It says, no sign or portion of the sign shall be permitted above a height of 2 feet from the established grade of the abutting street or roads.
Okay, so that would be in violation technically of doing
I
it that
believe,
way.
yes.
That's what I assumed it would be without looking at the actual language.
Additional comments? Another piece of information or another data point that I look at is, okay, thank you for sharing your thoughts and the hardship and the cost, et cetera. At some point, if we were to grant the waiver another 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, hopefully you guys are there for a long time, right? At some point, we just keep kicking the can with some of these signs in the township that we've got to, in my opinion, kind of focus in on those and get them in line with the ordinance or change the ordinance to, better fit situations like this. But I think we've been pretty consistent with sticking with the ordinance, some variations, some waivers here and there regarding the height, but I just, the magnitude of this, I think it's still pretty significant.
If it does help, the condition of that sign, it's about 20 years old. In my estimate, they're probably going to get another 5 to 10 years out of it. So if Goodwill stays for the term of their lease, that's probably the end of the life of that sign.
And that term is 5?
It's 7 years. Typically, when
7.
we lease a facility in a town, we're trying to determine if it's going to be a successful location. At that point, we usually want to try to own those facilities. Our goal at that point would be to replace the sign if it were under our ownership to whatever, but we would use more of a different type of monument sign at that point. we suggest not to incur that cost at this first part, especially since the sign has been there for 20 years already. I think the town is used to the size of the sign, so we'd request that variance. If we move forward at the end of the lease as a purchase, we would expect to improve the facility even more.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Mahoney.
As we take a vote on this proposal, can we or should we take this in parts, like maybe do part 1 and 4 and then 2 and 3 by themselves? Can we do that way? Maybe to expedite this, not make you guys come back again?
But I think we have to, I mean, it's either a pass or fail on the
Yeah.
whole thing, so.
I think that's what the
Is it?
direction was last time.
I think
Yeah.
last time this question was asked, and it's the entire proposed signage has to be submitted and approved as, or denied as submitted.
Mhm.
All right.
Yep. Okay. Further comments, discussion?
I do have one.
Yes. Mr. Andrews.
If we get to the point where the sign, you mentioned that the life could be another 5 to 7 years. If we get to the point where the sign would need to be refurbished or repaired or whatever, at the end of the life of a sign, whatever that looks like, would that need to come before the board again for an additional waiver, or would that be kind of grandfathered in by the ruling of this?
Well, if the sign would become dilapidated or need refurbished, that would be the property owner's responsibility. And if they came for another sign waiver, they would be desired to bring it back into compliance.
I'd happy to commit us to, if that sign, that were to happen, that we would replace that under the code that your expectations would be. And happy to put that into whatever waiver or variance you have at that point.
Question for maybe either Jody or Marty. As part of our motion, if the commission wanted to include a time frame for the waiver to grant it, subject to X years from now or X months from now, whatever it is, that it would have to be brought into compliance. Is that allowable?
That would probably be not the usual course that we see here with sign waivers, but thinking that this sign waiver ordinance aspect may hopefully soon mature into a variance at the Zoning Board of Appeals, where absolutely conditions can be placed on approval of a variance. So I would think that that would be a reasonable condition as part of the waiver granted here. And I think that, I may be talking out of place, but I think you couldn't do that, even though it doesn't specifically say, like in the Board of Zoning Appeals, that any conditions are appropriate.
Okay.
And I would just like to ask Mr. Camprath, if that's the desire of the commission, could they conclude that into either the leasee or the property owner if they're going to put a time frame that it has to be brought? Should it be a time frame that goodwill is no longer there, that the property owner would still have to bring it into compliance to avoid continuous variance request at the time, hopefully going back to the BZA for this property?
Well, I think if we're going to place a condition on it, that would be appropriate. I mean, it needs to flow with the property and not just with a tenant necessarily, though it would be geared, the timing would be geared towards what the tenant does, presumably with the sign. But the tenant may very well buy the property, and therefore it's going to be the property owner. So I'd like the condition to flow with the property, and the strings can be attached to the tenant or the property owner wanting to upgrade or change the sign, and or a time limit.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Steiner.
So, Mr. Colrate, you sort of beat me to the question there. So I guess if we're looking at this, the applicant stated, even though it's not taken the same in planning versus BZA as a $20-some thousand hardship, I think if this commission was to consider anything like the comments we've just been talking about, if there was a time frame imposed, whatever that that may be the will of the commission. The following the property, as Ms. Rector stated in the documents here, they are authorized to speak on behalf of Family Video in this case. So I think it would very easily be enforceable that if we did put a time frame on it, whether it's them directly, if they purchase the property, whether they turn it back over to Family Video, whether they turn it over and Family Video goes to somebody else, the sign must be brought into compliance. End of story at that point. So I think the hardship costs, as they stated, and us considering a time frame that might help offset some decision-making process here and timing.
Thank you, Mr. Steiner. My thought, if the commission wants to head in this direction on a time frame, is not 5 to 7 years. It's shorter than that. I would suggest something in the 2 to 3 year range, but definitely nothing longer than 5. I think we just got to keep it moving. Additional comments, Mr. Steiner?
I think it might be good, get our fellow board members a little more discussion here, what their thoughts are. I mean, we could make a motion and then it could go down.
Right.
Maybe a little discussion here where we're headed here. I tend to agree with Mr. Coverett there because, again, we are looking at a 47.75 foot variance. So looking for some more comments from our fellow commissioners.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Helm?
I could see putting a time frame on it, and at a 4 to 5 year period, at that point, it has to be replaced and brought into compliance. I'm okay with that decision.
Mr. Mahoney?
I like a 5-year time frame, and if it's not replaced, then it is removed completely, regraded, and all that is a stipulation too of any motion, I would suggest.
We're open to a 5-year time frame. We think that's very fair.
Additional comments? Mr. Andrews?
I agree. The 5-year time frame seems realistic.
Additional commentary?
I'll just say that I'm more in line with the 3 to 4, but that's just my personal opinion.
Okay, if there's no further comments, looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Mahoney?
I move we allow waiver for Goodwill Industries. Is it for Goodwill Industries or the owner of the property, which is Family Video?
The applicant is Goodwill Industries.
Okay, for Goodwill Industries to permit a second wall sign on Lewis Avenue in place of a permitted sign on Dean Road. A plus or minus 3.5 foot height waiver for the monument sign and a 47.75 square foot area waiver for the monument sign to be corrected or brought into compliance within 5 years of passage of this motion, and to permit an 8-book mural panel inserts in the existing light pillar, each panel measuring plus or minus 8 feet in height and 28 square feet in area that will not be illuminated. With the following considerations to be included in this motion: a sign and electrical permit that should be obtained from the Bedford Township Building Department, a waiver granted for this specific use, and the applicant shall continue to maintain the entire perimeter landscaped area of the base no less than 2 feet wide, growing in healthy condition, and the applicant shall continue to work with the township to ensure the placement of the signs meets all requirements of this waiver.
Support for the motion?
Second.
Support.
Who was that?
Mr. Lamkowski.
Mr. Lampkowski supported it.
Comment?
Yes.
Mr. Mahoney, you had originally stated a time frame, and also if nothing was done, it would need to be graded, taken down and graded. Did you?
I did not include that, but I'll accept that amendment.
And then the other thing, the second sign on Lewis Avenue, we need to stipulate that it must be part of a V on that roof line, the entrance, instead of just a sign anywhere on the building.
Okay, I'll add that to my motion as well. That the bookstore sign will be the two parts of the V only.
Is that okay with the supporter?
Yeah.
Yep. One question, I guess, Marty, you were explaining the tying this to the property versus the tenant. Do we need to add anything else to this motion? Mr. Mahoney stating that it will be removed and graded if it's not brought into compliance. Do we need to add anything else regarding a different tenant, different property owner? Any future sign must be in compliance with the sign ordinance.
I believe it would be helpful for clarity in 4.5 years from now that you tie both the property owner, whoever that might be, and the tenant to this. And so it can flow with the land that way. So both the property owner and the tenant are represented here tonight and would be obligated by that condition.
I'll amend my motion to include that if after the 5-year time period the sign is not replaced, that it be removed completely, earth regraded to be as new by the owner and or the tenant of the property.
I second that change.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion? Okay. Mr. Lamkowski, take the roll call vote, please.
Just does it have to be random, different every
Your
time?
motion?
Preferably, we have the roll call is who made the motion, who's second, then all the other members, and the chair is last unless they make the motion.
All right. Mahoney.
Aye.
Lamkowski. Aye is aye. Helm.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Coverett.
Aye.
Andrews.
Aye.
Steiner.
Aye.
Motion passes. Or you do that first.
All right. Thank you,
Good
guys.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, gentlemen. Good luck.
And you can say motion carried.
I can. Okay.
All right. Moving on to item number 8B under new business. Request for a sign waiver for Ella's State Line Liquor Store in a C3 General Commercial Zoning District on parcel number 5802-102-007-10, otherwise known as 6517 Telegraph Road, Erie, Michigan 48133. Jody?
I'm sorry, could you tell me how to pronounce your name? Nishan. The applicant is Nishan Patel for Ella's Grocery. Sign company is Colonial Signs. Location is 6517 Telegraph Road, Erie, Michigan. Parcel number 5802-102-007-10, C3 General Commercial. On May 28, 2003, a sign waiver was granted, and I included the analysis in the minutes for the Planning Commission's information. The applicant at that time was granted to install the proposed sign on the north side of the structure, as the structure is a corner lot having two road frontages, Smith Road and Telegraph Road, conditioned upon the Michigan Lottery sign existing on the roof to be permanently removed, which has since been removed. At that time, there was no decision on the prior nonconforming roof-mounted sign. At this time, the applicant is requesting to permit the existing roof-mounted two-sided sign illuminated to move forward and replace the insert. However, per section 400-1922V states, permanent non-freestanding signs shall be wall signs attached to a wall of the building such that no part of the sign shall be located higher than the lowest point of the roof attached to the wall of the building where the sign is located. For a gable roof, except as specific in the next sentence, the sign shall not be located higher than the imaginary straight line connecting the two lowest points of the roof attached to the wall where the sign is located. Where an entrance to the building is located on the same wall where a gable roof exists, the wall may be located above the entrance and above the imaginary straight line connecting the two lowest points of the gable roof, so long as the sign is no higher than and does not protrude on or over any part of the roof or supporting structure of the roof other than the wall itself. There shall be no roof signs or other non-freestanding signs other than wall signs. Per section 400-1922.6, in all districts states notwithstanding the other provisions of this section, 1922.6, for each building where one wall sign is allowed, another other than one family or two family dwelling, and where the building has at least two sides, each of which has frontage and faces a road or a street right-of-way, there may be 2 wall signs, one for each of the 2 sides of the building, and each may be a maximum size allowed for 1 wall for the particular zoning district involved. While there is an existing wall sign on the north side of the structure, permitted by ordinance, the applicant has expressed to the planning department there is no visible location on the east side of the structure, nor a safe area outside the road right-of-way, and the applicant also did work with MDOT in trying to install a monument sign. Thus, the request to maintain the existing roof-mounted, 2-sided illuminated and replace the insert. Should the request be considered, the following waivers are required. Permit the existing roof-mounted sign to remain and replace the insert as presented, and the following shall be considered in any inclusion for any motion to approve. A sign permit shall be obtained from Bedford Township, and should there be any electrical changes, a permit is required. A waiver granting it for this specific use, and the applicant shall continue to work with the township to ensure a sign meets all the requirements of this waiver.
Thank you, Judy.
Good evening, everyone.
Please state your name and address for the record, please.
Nishan Patel, 6517 Telegraph Road, Erie, Michigan, 48133.
Great, thank you. Any additional information you want to provide to the commission?
You know, as Judy mentioned earlier, I tried to talk to MDOT to see if we can put a monument sign, but you know, where we are located, Telegraph is a highway, and we have to have certain distance to put the sign up, and there's no room. So that's why the request to just replace the signage that's upstairs on the roof. We are just changing the panels. It's very beat up. It doesn't illuminate, so we're just replacing the panels and just the lights.
Okay. Thank you. Open it up for discussion. Mr. Lamkowski.
Due to the circumstances with the monument sign on being on Telegraph, I'm in full support of this motion.
Thank you.
I think it makes total sense.
Thank you. Mr. Mahoney.
This item, part of the motion should include the applicant shall continue with the township to ensure the sign meets all requirements of the waiver. Has the sign been inspected? Just curious how it's held down. It looks like there's 4x4s and the sign is built on top of the 2 4x4s.
Right, so it was on the roof before, but we redid the whole roof. We changed the whole roof. So what they did was they lift the sign up and they bolted everything onto the roof so it doesn't damage the bottom of the roof because it's on an awning right now.
I'm just curious, has the building department come out to inspect it? Did you meet with Dennis Kohler?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
And he's good with it?
No, I don't think Dennis Kohler has come out to inspect the sign yet, no.
I'm sorry. I believe the sign has been there for many years, so I'm sure that if they removed it to do the roof repair and then put it back, I don't believe Mr. Kohler would have went out and inspected a sign at that point.
Okay.
Okay. Further discussion? Mr. Steiner.
You beat me to my question, but I'm just going to repeat it. So you talked to MDOT, because when I first saw it, I thought, well, what about putting the sign on the corner angled? But again, you probably can't get back far enough to get out of that road right away. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I would think, though, if it's considered to be approved, I would still think that even though obviously if you put a new roof on, you would hope that somebody made sure the roof was going to support, right?
Yes.
Again, I would think to make sure it is all still code plus the electrical, I think Mr. Kohler would still have to come out and inspect that to ensure that. So I think if that's the case, if the commission is inclined to go this direction, I think that would need to be part of the motion.
Okay. So I'll share some thoughts. I went out and drove by, looked at the property.
Okay.
You know, just one thing that hit me right away was there's a nice sign on the north side of the building.
Yeah.
You know, nice big visible sign. On the south side of the building, and again, I think what you're trying to capture is the north and south flow on telegraphs, right? So on the south side, there is wall area for a sign on the second floor, and there's actually maybe not as big as the sign on the north side, but just the roof and the angles. But it looks like there's room for a sign on the south wall. second floor, and then there's actually right now, as of 6 o'clock tonight, there's I'm guessing 2-foot-ish by 6-foot-ish dimensions sign that's on the first floor on the wall right now. And it didn't look like it was advertising your business. It was for a product or something.
Yes.
So that tells me there's room, at least there's a sign there right now that's visible. I drove by and I could see it, and there was a car right in front of it parked there. So to me, there's room on the south wall for a sign. And we look at the sign that's been there, at least back in 2003, it was already prior non-conforming. And to my comment that I made to the previous applicant, at some point we have to address these signs that are non-conforming and try to bring them into compliance with the ordinance. That's why we're here. That's why we have ordinances, to try to keep things in line with that. So this is our opportunity to do that, to bring it into compliance. It's been 20 years, and if we don't try to address this now, it could be another 20 years. So I personally, I'm not in favor of granting this waiver because I think there's room on the south side, 2 options, either up at the top on the second floor or on the first floor. And if you look at the east wall, there's room there on the wall. You probably would need to limit someone parking there on the east wall because that would probably block, the view of the sign. But you've got a lot of parking on the north side, south side. I think losing one parking spot to maintain visibility of a sign, I don't think that's unreasonable. So for me, I'm for those reasons, I'm not in support of this waiver request.
So I got something I would like to add. We recently acquired a land on Telegraph Road where hopefully we'll relocate. We'll move the store from here to there. But it's gonna, it's gonna be about 1.5 to 2 years before, till everything fall in place. So would it be possible to, grant me that sign for about a couple of years until I relocate? That'll be more, because once I relocate, it's going to be completely the whole new building, and everything will be compliance.
Okay, well, thank you for suggesting that. We obviously, you listened to the last application, so that's great. I'll leave that up to the commission and further discussion to take that into consideration. Mr. Mahoney.
Will you continue to own the property?
We will, but it won't be used. We haven't decided what it's going to be used for, but my main concern was I've been trying to rebuild the store for about last 15 years, and you're probably tired of seeing me. And as I said earlier, because it's a telegraph highway and I can't rebuild, so that was the purpose of buying another property where I can rebuild the store and make it, make it look really nice and, everything into compliance.
Yeah, it's an awkward lot, right, the way it's laid out. Yep.
Yeah.
Is there a reason to not consider the south wall for a sign at this point?
So when Colonial came out and took a look at it, they suggested not, because it wouldn't be very visible if you're coming from the south side. Because once you come to the parking lot, that's when you'll see it. That's the only issue with being on the south wall.
Okay.
So when you move out of that property, you'll remove all the signs off the building?
Yes, we can do that. Absolutely.
Further discussion. Mr. Steiner.
I think one thing with Ella's, I think anybody that's of eligible age, let's put it that way, or within, if they've been around this area for any time at all, everybody pretty much knows where Ella's is and who they are, what you do. Obviously successful if you've been there as many years as you have over there. I know you mentioned hopefully another 1.5, 2 years to take this other property, build a new building, but as we all know, the economics can change that in a heartbeat. Even if somebody tried to make a motion with a stipulation, that you're going to build, there's no guarantee you're going to build. So that's something you really can't throw into any kind of motion. I mean, they could say if you don't rebuild, then you tear everything down, but that sort of defeats the purpose. Now, Mr. Corvette mentioned the south wall. I see that, but I also see, as he also referenced, on the north end of the building, but on the Telegraph side, you've got that large wall there. If you put a couple of pylons so people couldn't park there, a nice illuminated sign right on the front of that side of the building, I don't think it's going to hurt any traffic noticeability if it was on the building. So whether it's on the south or the east side of the building, that would be my preference as well. So it just depends on what the rest of the commission wants to do, and whether they deny or whether they approve with north wall, south wall, roof, and then we go from there.
Because on the north side, they have a right of way, so there's a driveway that goes into the trailer court behind me, and then plus there won't be enough room to put a pylon sign on
No,
Telegraph and Smith.
I'm sorry, not a pylon sign.
Okay.
I meant right in front of the building there.
Okay.
So if a couple feet out from your sidewalk, if you put a couple of pylons right there so people can't park there. That way your sign would not be blocked if it was on that part of the building. So it's not actually putting it out in the parking lot, it'd be still on the building itself.
Yeah. Bump posts or something to.
Either that or bump out some concrete for the sidewalk. Yeah. So not actually a separate sign.
Yeah, again, that is definitely an option, the east wall. Me going over there, it was dark, 6 o'clock, and I kind of drove past and came back, and I'm not going to just counterpoint with your sign folks, but I had no problem seeing the building, and there's a bright light right there that you have on the building, the south wall. I think a sign would be very visible there. So.
Could I make a comment?
Absolutely.
Regarding the idea of a wall sign on the south side, maybe this is a question for Mr. Camprith, but would a sign on the south side of the building be permitted, or would a sign only be permitted on walls that face a street right away? I guess is that.
It would probably be a different waiver, right?
Yeah, I think they're allowed on the frontage, on the front side of the building, unless it's a corner, then you've got two front sides, and the ordinance speaks specifically that it can have two signs of legal size on both of the exposed frontages. So I'm not so sure that a south-facing sign against those trees or whatever zoning that is down there would even be permissible without a waiver.
So we're looking at the north and the east side being the only two eligible locations, with the north already having a sign.
Yeah. Without a waiver. Yeah.
And obviously the other side of that too is, in reality, we couldn't even make a motion to put it on the south side because that's, number one, it's not permissible with the ordinance, and we can't grant a waiver that wasn't requested either. So it would have to be totally different than that.
Yep. Correct. Mr. Helm?
I also drove by the building and kind of looked. I have no problem with it staying where it's at. It's on the roof. It is in disarray now, so I'd like to see it brought up in a new sign. The south side, obviously now we talked about that it can't be done, but there's a bunch of trees and things, and if you're running the speed limit and through Telegraph, I think you're going pretty quick to not see where it's at. So I'm okay with granting the sign the way it is.
Thank you. Mr. Fritz?
I have no problem with granting the way the proposal is. One, it's been there for a long time, not that it makes it right, but if somebody was concerned about that, maybe there could be the same information put on that one as the last one, 7 years or 5 years. But I have no problem with it being passed like this.
Thank you, Mr. Fritz. I think the applicant mentioned 1.5 to 2 year, is your plan.
That's the plan, yes.
Yeah, so I guess my suggestion, if someone were to make a motion to that regard, and I would definitely be in favor of setting a time frame of 2 years And at that point, whether, to Rick's point of whether there's a building or any, it doesn't matter if there's a new building or not, in 2 years, that sign must be in compliance.
I think that's one thing that the more and more we discuss signage, bringing things into compliance, when these requests do come forward, I think this is our avenue instead of waiting to see what happens down the road with some of these stipulations within a waiver that clearly state within 1.5, 2 years, whatever the time frame may be, it does make it cut and dry. It must come into compliance at that point. Used to be things would sort of be grandfathered, they'd sit out there, and then 10, 15 years down the road,
20 plus years down the road?
30, somebody might come back. I mean, we'd look at the one we had there, the sign at Smith and Lewis, that big monument, the brick one, a similar scenario. And I think it's good that we do put those kind of timeframes in if we do consider to do these. I mean, obviously, we want you to succeed. We don't want you to spend $1 zillion to just keep a sign on your building or move it somewhere on the property. I think as you listen to the commission, I think that people here are open to suggestions to try to make possible for you, but also to make sure that we do our job so we don't continue to grandfather or go outside of what should be brought into proper zoning compliance.
Understand.
It does create more enforcement headaches for the township to track all that, but it does give the teeth, so to speak, that, you know, it's a measurable milestone that we can, you know, understand.
We appreciate business in the community. We need you guys.
Thank you.
And just to give confirmation to the commission, proceeding forward, we've been notating any comments in the building and the assessing department and putting a scroll, so any further, should anything change in the future, that those would be notated. Should another permit be pulled for that location, that would be notated.
Great, thank you.
You got me to our last item on the agenda.
All right, further discussion? If not, looking for a motion.
I do have one other note.
Yes, Mr. Andrews.
I'm in favor of granting the request with some of the conditions stated. Maybe the time frame is a good idea. One other thing I noticed in driving by, your canopy on the southeast side is currently damaged a little bit. Looks like it got clipped by maybe a truck that was more than 10 feet or something.
By U-Haul, yes.
Is there any way we could maybe, I don't know if we'd, it was hard to tell, and I wouldn't even be the guy to ask if that was just cosmetic or if it has some structural implications, the damage, but could we maybe condition that be repaired given the location of the sign being supported on top of the canopy? I mean, just kind of brings into question if that's in disrepair or in bad shape. You know, maybe that's dangerous.
No, U-Haul did hit it. Try to go through it. There was a police report also made. We do have insurance company coming out, and they're going to, make sure everything's okay, and they're going to make all the repairs that we need to make.
Good. Good to hear.
And there's a big sign on it too, 10 feet. And
yeah, I saw that, and it was kind of broken in. But somebody missed it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were right when you said U-Haul tried to drive through it.
Yes.
Not through the drive-through. They tried to drive through the
and the funny thing is, he hit it, and he almost took off, and then he hit the side of the awning. Luckily, there was a Monroe cop that was sitting right across, and he got him. But he shook the whole building.
Oh, I'm sure.
That's the main reason why I need to rebuild the store.
Note to self: new building, no 10-foot canopy.
No awnings.
14 foot or higher. 14 foot or higher.
Absolutely.
Even a tractor trailer get back through there then.
Further discussion or looking for a motion? Mr. Helm?
Chair, I'll make a motion.
Yes, sir. Mr. Helm.
I'll make a motion that we approve the sign waiver for 6517 Telegraph Road, Erie, Michigan, parcel number 5802-102-007-10. should the request be considered, find waivers are required, permit the existing roof mount monument sign to remain and replace the insert as presented. The following shall be considered, including a motion is approved. The sign permit shall be obtained from Bedford Township should there be any electrical changes or permit required. A waiver is granted is a specific use. I'm going to put a 3-year time frame on this. I know how things take to progress, but I feel 3 years is sufficient. The applicant shall continue to work with the township to ensure the sign meets all the requirements of this waiver.
I'll second.
Moved and supported by Mr. Fritz. Any further discussion? Mr. Steiner?
I can just, I'll say right now as a comment, the applicant made a statement. I couldn't support 3 years. I could support 2 years as the applicant stated, but I couldn't support 3. And then we also need to add, because there is going to be electricity, so they would have to pull a permit, and then at the same time they do that inspection, that Mr. Kohler could inspect the roof, or I should say our building inspector should inspect the roof to ensure everything is up to code as well.
And I would also echo the 2-year. The applicant offered that up, and I think you know that's enough time to make it happen. So I would support a 2-year. So, Mr. Helm, I don't know if you want to modify your motion.
I'll accept your friendly amendments and also the friendly amendment that Mr. Kohler goes out for the electrical inspection and roof structure that the sign can be supported.
Mr. Fritz, you okay with the
Yes.
changes? Yep. Any further discussion? Mr. Steiner?
And just state, I mean, it doesn't make a big difference, but just state that it's a building inspector, because it may not be Mr. Kohler, it might be a contracted inspector, so just clarification.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, Mr. Lamkowski, take the roll call vote, please.
Mr. Helm,
Aye.
Mr. Fritz,
Aye.
Mr. Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Coverett,
Aye.
Mr. Andrews,
Aye.
Mr. Steiner,
Aye.
Mr. Lamkowski votes aye. The motion carries.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck. Yep.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Can't wait to see that new building. Can't wait to see that new building.
Neither can I.
You've earned it.
Hopefully the economy holds out, because you've earned it.
You know, it's a good area, you know, so everything should be okay.
Yep.
But thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care.
Okay, moving on to item number 8C, discussion on sections of the sign ordinance. Jody.
First, you'll see that you had additional information. Been working with Mr. Mahoney on some sign information, and he did supply the additional information to me, and I wanted to make sure everybody had it in case we refer to any of that portion of the ordinance tonight. And Mr. Mahoney also suggested that we maybe break it down into sections so we can get a clear direction. I'm happy to have a full commission tonight so we can have discussion and maybe get some clear direction. Won't be making any motions of what we're going to approve because it's only for the amendments to the language. So if we could just get a clear census of everyone's input and desires to move forward with the language, so then we can then revamp the language and change it for presentation to maybe move forward with the public hearing. So enclosed, you will find a copy of the sign ordinance. Planning Department has had discussions with Mr. Mahoney on moving forward to focus on specific areas for discussions and decisions on potential changes and or amendments to the sign ordinance. Planning Department determined this suggestion would be a more productive way to approach the sign ordinance due to the volume of the ordinance language. And in blue, you will see the items that were discussed on October 12th of 2022. Item L of the ordinance says all freestanding signs shall not exceed the maximum height and surface area specified in section 1922 for the use, zoning district, and or type of specific sign. All permanent freestanding signs shall be monument signs. The maximum height surface area of a permanent freestanding sign shall apply to the surface advertising space, and there shall be allowed an additional square footage of decorative structure not exceeding the maximum square footage allowed for the sign, or 50 square feet, whichever is less. The portion that we're looking at is a monument sign shall be a sign where the bottom of the sign above the ground is an extension of the underground foundation and decorative structure on the top of the foundation that runs at least the entire width of the widest part of the sign. The bottom of the sign above ground is no less wide than any other part of the sign above ground, and the decorative structure on top of the foundation above ground is made of stone, brick, rock, or similar nature decorative material, or made of similar looking man-made material. And we've had some waivers on this. For example, I did not include them, but Dr. Lehman's office on the corner of Secor and Smith, where the sign actually protrudes out with the inserts for each individual unit. I believe the corner of Stearns and Secor has a sign where the top of it is wider that came for a sign waiver. I'm sorry, and I apologize if I call it a variance because I look at it as a variance. A sign waiver where the sign is wider than the base. And moving forward, I would like to be able to offer some design changes so they're not looking all like square box monument signs. And I think that that will encourage some, if you look in the section of the ordinance, letter E of the ordinance does require every sign must be constructed in accordance with the township building code and constructed and maintained in a well-kept, repaired, neat, painted, stained, sealed, and preserved manner, including all structural parts of the sign, and all signs must be maintained in a structurally safe manner not hazardous to the health of the property, and must be able to withstand a minimum wind load of 20 pounds per square foot. So I think that changing some of the design of the sign, that will cover of the structural base of it, that it still has to come to building code and withstand that 20 pounds of wind. I don't know what the desire of the commission is, but I'm just giving thoughts as a planning and signs that have been presented to the commission in the past. So if we'd like to start with that one first and see any other desires, we can leave it the same. We can remove that language. We can change that language. I still think the 7 feet in height is a desirable size. My concern of changing height and square footage is then every other sign that's already in the township would have to seek a sign waiver should they desire to change. So I'd like to keep some of the language in regards to that, but I think this would give sign companies some architectural change features to make signs look more than just a box looking, if you see a lot of those styles in the township right now.
So Jody, right now, thank you for that. Are you asking us about the upper yellow shading or the
Yes,
first
just
page? Just the yellow.
I would like the top to stay the same because it does state that they can have the 50 square feet of base and the amount of signage that's permitted by ordinance. But when you get down to the highlighted area in yellow, that's where it states that all of those structurally have to beat the base of the size of the sign.
Okay. Does anyone have any concern? Mr. Lamkowski?
I would agree with the proposed that the top can be bigger than the bottom. A little creativity never hurt anybody.
I'm all right with it.
Mr. Steiner?
I agree. Well, again, we want to be careful how we do it, again, so we don't throw everybody into a variance or a waiver, depending on where they would go here, where they go to BZA. I would think that if you stated that the main structure cannot protrude, so in other words, if you have your base and then you have your main part of your monument, and then what generally is taking place, like the one there at the corner of Smith and Secor, the one at Lambertville, it's an accessory sign, if you want to call it that, because it's another business involved or another portion. So, and they only come out, I think, about 6 inches, if that. But it does give that little bit of aesthetic look. So, again, it's not just a square uniform box that lets everybody just build a bunch of square boxes. So that, I think, is okay. And maybe we stipulate that the main sign is X and it goes straight up, not to exceed the base. But if it's a sign that has additional businesses, or maybe let's just say a business it's the same business, but they've got 2, 3, 4 different functions within their business. Maybe if they state, let's say a workout facility, if they have a little square rectangle about this big that says, private instruction or private workout, or we have spin classes, or, whatever, just an idea of what they offer or another business. I think if you went 6 inches or 3 inches, whatever, I think it'd be easier if that was automatically in there, again, to keep from people having to come to get variances or waivers from Planning Commission. The other thing I wanted to ask, the ordinance doesn't state, but it talks about a foundation. It doesn't state whether the foundation, at least here, I don't see it, and Jody, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't see where it says the foundation must be at least 1 foot high, 2 foot high. It just says the foundation protruding, and then the monument cannot exceed. Do we want to put in that the foundation, the base must be at least, 12 inches high, 24 inches high?
Well, we measure however tall they want the sign, and it's the overall height of the sign from the grade. So if they put 2 foot of base of the foundation for the sign, then they're only permitted the 5 feet in height of signage. So
Okay.
that is per the applicant. They know they can only have 7. Some in the overlays, they're only permitted 4 feet in height. So they usually have 1 foot of base and then 3 foot of signage. But that is the overall height of the sign, is the base and the foundation, and they can have that as decorative. But when they do submit, they submit the structural portion of the base to the building department. That's why I talked about letter E, saying that they have to have the building code, and it has to still withstand that. I don't know what the commission's comments are, but I don't know what type of language for your comments regarding 6 design or a multi-unit structure. I don't know how we would regulate that otherwise of the base not being wider than the foundation. If it's all the same size, I don't know if we design it to say that only the top can be wider than the base. I don't know what type of language we would use.
Yeah, and so keep that in mind, everybody. But and the other thing was, too, is keep in mind with the base, if somebody decided they wanted to have a 6-inch base, because we now also talked further down, though, we talk about the language of what the landscaping looks like. It doesn't necessarily mean bushes. It's decorative, because we're talking about stone and different things like that down in here further. So keep that in mind as we talk about the base itself.
Mr. Mahoney?
Well, I think part of the other issue we were running into is now that with the advent of these LED signs, and Jody, I should have brought it with me, but I sent you a list of all the LED signs that were approved a waiver, and I think it was almost all of the LED signs that went up in the township.
All of the signs that are LED, other than maybe the churches, some churches are permitted, and banks would be permitted to have the scrolling LED signs without a waiver. But yes, every other location in the township that has a LED message board has been granted a sign waiver.
So part of the problem is it's like the minimum size the sign people like to work with seems to be like 4 by 8. So right off the bat, you've used up 32 square feet of your 50 square feet. And if they go with a post cap design, you count the air to the left of it, so they'll consume all of it that fast, and they're always going to come at seeking a waiver for the square footage. So that's something we have to look at. And all right, so do we allow a larger sign if there's air involved? I don't know, but I don't know that we're going to escape people seeking waivers as long as, and then the artistic flair of the sign making company. So, do we just keep it the same at 50 square feet?
Well, here's another thought. Again, you've got your main sign, okay? And if there's anything that goes outside of it, let's just say that if you talked about 6 inches, so the accessory piece, again, for another business or advertising part of your business, say if there's 3 or 4 or 5 of them, that if they did stick out 6 inches, but that you could not say, I'm just going to build another sign that's going to be that much wider. You can't do that. But if you said, if it's part of an accessory, these little inserts, you take an envelope that goes up the sides, and what is that square footage? So in other words, you had your 50 square feet, and say off to the right, maybe you've got another 5 square feet over here for the accessory signage or 2 square feet, for the sides. And that might be a way to look at that. So again, you're assigning, the main sign cannot exceed the 50, but those little, we got to come up with a name for those little insert signs instead of just inserts.
Well, I think in this case, with this portion of the language, it's not actually, I just used that one as an example,
Right.
but this is actually any sign that would not want to have it as the base. So I don't want to get hung up on whether they're going to have a multi-unit or a specific type of use for it, because it could be just that they want a 12 by 12 base, but they want the pillar to be sticking out on the side. Sorry.
Okay, Jody.
That was very dramatic.
Is everybody
Guests are
awake
gone.
now?
We have to-
I barely touched it.
We've been nice tonight.
The
Come
base
on.
on the sides. So I don't want to discourage if they want to put pillars and then they don't want it to be as wide, or even one pillar would be considered wider than the base. And keep in mind that the pillars and that on the sign are considered the base, not part of the sign. So that would be part of the 50 square feet of the base. Still could have 50 square feet of signage for a monument sign.
Mm-hmm.
It's the height that becomes the concern.
Right.
Any further discussion on this first yellow highlighted paragraph?
I guess we got to give her some good direction here. Otherwise, we'll be discussing it for the next 2 or 3 meetings.
So do we have a majority that are saying they are not opposed to at least removing the portion that says that the bottom of the sign above ground is an extension of the underground foundation, and decorative structure on top of the foundation runs at least the entire width of the widest part of the sign? That's the biggest section of that portion that I think is, I don't have a problem with the bottom of the sign above ground is no less wide. That's where you get the wide of the sign above ground. Can't be wider than the sign.
Yeah.
Makes
Yes,
sense.
that makes sense. Everyone's thumbs up.
Everyone
Yep.
thinks- Okay. On to the next section. And I know we've discussed this, and you can see in the blue, we've had some agreements and changes. Freestanding signs shall be permitted in a zoning district other than a residential zoning district unless otherwise developed as a non-residential use permitted within a residential zoning district. Excuse me, shall allow for an LED message board conditioned upon. Commission has agreed that the sign message shall change no less than 5-second intervals. That has been part of every variance sign waiver that has been granted. There was discussion of the sign to dim at dusk or to be turned off. When abutting a residential zoning district, the sign must be dimmed and remain in a single message at dusk or be turned off. As a planning department and the previous waivers that have been granted, I would like it to either stay as the sign dim at dusk or be turned off, because I believe those are the languages that have been used previously. The sign shall only advertise for the use of the parcel. That was discussed. I don't believe there was any census of the commission's desires. As a planning department, I support that, so we don't have issues of other properties advertising for other uses. And then you'll see some information from Mr. Mahoney regarding the brightness and the required lumen measurement language. A lot of our variance sign waiver requests have been very accommodating in having, most of them are remote and digital. They can do that from their phone as a property owner. I don't know how we, I know it's been discussed previously. I know you sent in information on a measuring tool. Becomes an ordinance enforcement nightmare. Same thing we have with lights pollution. So I don't know about requiring a certain lumen. I would say with it be dimming at dusk or turned off. If we get a complaint, ordinance goes out and expresses, and then it can be also still addressed. Restrict the LED sign to allow for a maximum of 32 square feet. As a planning department, I'm not inclined to be in favor of that, as the 50 square feet of signage is permitted in the zoning districts of the commercial districts. It's what we've been allowing. Majority of the LED signs already are pretty close to 40 square feet in signage. Should that change and go to 32 square feet, they were to come back for anything, the sign would have to be brought into compliance, and then the sign would have to be made smaller. Allow a permanent insert in addition to the LED signs. As a planning department, I would be opposed to that, as that's the purpose of the LED message board, is to provide for the advertising, the business itself. I don't have an issue if we want to include that they can put the maybe address of the location in it so it's not scrolling on the bottom of the sign, but I don't know about a permanent insert for, that's the purpose of the LED sign. And then we would remove the no flashing, moving, oscillating, or intermittent type of illuminated sign or display shall be permitted in any other zoning district, except for time and temperature signs that are designed to serve the public rather than advertise, and which must be first approved by the Planning Commission. I am in favor of keeping that because that is most banks have that on their bank sign, the time and temperature. They're not scrolling and advertising for anything, no loans or anything of that type of nature going on at the bank. So most places of worship also have time and temperature. Some of those places of worship have come for sign waivers to allow for the LED boards, and that is why they're permitted to show other events going on, as long as it's directed to the place of worship that's going on at that location, not somewhere else.
So Jody, quick question. All these items where you have a question mark, thank you for providing your thoughts, because that's my first question is going to be, what do you think? You're dealing with this every day. Where did those come from? Why are they even here, like, for us to consider?
The brightness and the luminance were discussed at a previous meeting. Right. And the resume at dawn requires sensor to be installed was discussed when I think Mr. Harrell was here talking about leaving the sign at previous minutes that have had discussion.
So just various things that have come up.
In the past.
So what I would say, personally, A, B, C, D, E, F, I agree with all of your statements that with B, resume at dawn seems to make sense as opposed to a sensor. D, no. I think that's, if there's an issue, we could deal with it at that point through enforcement. E would be no, based on your commentary. You know, the 50 square feet's 50 square feet. And the permanent sign insert, I would also say no. That's what the sign is for, the LED sign. Spoke in favor of maintaining time and temperature. I would agree with that. So I throw that out for the commission to consider.
I second.
I'm agreeing.
Nodding head.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. The one thing, just for clarification, the resume at dawn under section B and requiring a sensor to be installed, you said no sensor?
I said no to a sensor, just to, or, well, I guess I'm open. Go ahead, Rick.
So, and I'm just thinking there too. I mean, the current way is the owner must make those changes manually.
Yeah.
Requiring a sensor, it could be done by sensor or could be done manually. I think if somebody's building a brand new sign, so I wouldn't say that everybody has to go back and everybody has to hurry up and go buy a sensor, but maybe new signs that are built. Again, talking to Mr. Harrell, he had some really good comments, and it sounds to me like a lot of his signs, they are building the sensors in anyway. So I don't think that's going to be a major issue. In fact, you know, I see we have something in these extra documents here. There's a sensor here is $270.
What do you mean,
that's a luminous meter. Never mind. That's not the sensor. I can't believe a sensor is that expensive to add to an LED sign.
Anybody have thoughts on that? 'Cause I can go either way. Mr. Mahoney?
On page 167 of the Ann Arbor sign ordinance, you know, they address this, and I don't know how old this is. I know they just revised this in about 2 years ago. But they address a lot of things regarding LED signs. I just think it might be a good idea to at least see what they're doing. You know, it's good to specify limits. I've only heard one complaint in the township. I mean, my ear isn't everywhere, and it predates anybody on the commission, I think. But the library sign, apparently people across the street thought it was too bright. And anytime it changed, they saw it in their living room, you know. they resolved the issue. And I'm sure there's less expensive meters to gauge the nits. And as I mentioned to Jody, I said, we probably never even have to buy one because nobody's going to complain. If they do, you try to resolve it, and it doesn't come down to, let's get the meter out and see what that reads, And at that point in time, you'd purchase one, but I don't think it would come to it. I think it's good to review this and maybe consider entering it into our ordinance because it covers the bases. If there's a couple things that it doesn't, the 5-second change interval, and also that it should only advertise for the use of the parcel. And to digress on one other issue is just, should we specify, we say not in residential districts. What about agricultural, commercial, industrial? Is it just commercial, industrial? Or would we allow it in the other ones as well?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
If you should allow LED signs in a residential area or just commercial and industrial?
Is that under O? Is that what you're referring to, this one?
Yeah, I suppose so.
Can we table that for a second? We'll come back and see if we can come to a conclusion on A through F. Mr. Fritz, you had something to add there?
I just want to say, most of those should be able to be put in with a timer or to make the changes, with your smartphone or the computer, because that's how they put all the messages on usually. The old ones, it wasn't, but now most is coming through with all them accessories. You can just about make it any color you want, brightness. One problem with getting that meter out and making an ordinance for that, you're going to have to say how far away to measure that dimness or brightness.
And you got to have a professional tell you exactly what that lumen number needs to be. And somebody might say, well, there's not anybody within 300 feet.
Right.
So what's the difference? Well, if you don't, you'd have to say, well, if you're within 300 feet, you can go this how many lumens. But if it's within 50 feet, you got to go down to this many lumens. And again, they're just like chickens. The ordinance would become a nightmare. And again, like Mr. Mahoney said, we really haven't had a ton of complaints, but it only takes one that will go after something and never stop. So we just have to, and we don't want to get anybody in any type of quagmire and pinned in a corner.
The next slide.
I just like the sensor thing on all new signs must have the sensor.
So one question there, Rick, I guess, and thanks, Mr. Mahoney, for bringing the other ordinance to refer to. What I saw there looking at it was 30 minutes before opening of any business on the same lot. There's going to be, some businesses may open early and it's still dark. So the sensor wouldn't turn the light on yet. If it's like an automatic sensor, if you put some sort of
that's where it says or remote though. So
they have that opportunity.
Yeah, but
we have to. Wouldn't that require us though to have some sort of a 30 minutes before to turn it on? Some sort of a trigger,
some kind of guideline that.
I like that minutes. I like some.
Well, if you told them that they could, turn the sign on. Most of those places, just like your fast food restaurants, most of those guys don't turn their signs on until they're open because they don't want people driving through the drive-thrus and sitting there honking their horn when they're not open for 20 minutes. Ms. Rector, you got a comment, I can tell.
Well, I just have a comment that most of the LED boards are not being turned off. They're just being dimmed. So I don't know how then we would now enforce them to shut them off. I think it's dimmed or been turned off in the motions, so that's why we notated it. And I believe Mr. Steiner is right that Mr. Harrell did speak that majority of the signs that are being designed today all have the inputted sensors in them, but that it can be turned down.
That's a good point.
Then,
so they're not being turned off. They're just
they're just dimmed down.
Okay. They could probably set it that way to go. I'm just going to use weird numbers. Take it from 100 lumens down to 15 lumens at when a downtime, and then uptime it comes back up.
Yep. All right. I like that sensor idea.
Well, and on that note, about being as specific as possible. That's what I like about the Ann Arbor ordinance. They actually specifically mention the nits, and you could say, all right, at 5 feet, at 10 feet, I don't care, but at least you have got a quantitative ordinance versus a qualitative one where one, that's just too bright. Can you turn that down more, you know? So I think it's good to at least specify that quantity.
Okay. So we're good with the ordinance, the sensor? All right, so I think everyone generally kind of nodded their head to your feedback. You want
To
us
include the sensor or
to include the sensor.
to include the sensor? I just want to make sure we
So,
got
yeah, A, Commissioner already agreed. B, sensor, yes. C is fine. D, no. E, no. Leave it at 50. And F would be no. And then remove the to be removed. I think everyone agreed with that. To remove it.
And then I just wanted to go back to Mr. Mahoney's comment about the
Where?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe our ordinance now allows them permitted in any zoning district other than residential. I wouldn't desire to have an LED message board and a residential subdivision. Sometimes they're difficult to even maintain them to be lighted and backlit for identification purposes. We wouldn't want them to then start advertising for garage sale signs and that on an LED board. That would be my thoughts as a planning department. I don't know how associations are in all developments, who's going to maintain the LED board moving forward in a residential district. Now, having said that, that's why I said unless otherwise developed as a non-residential use permitted within the residential. We do have those types of uses where schools, places of worship, those are the two off the top of my
PBO,
head I know that are permitted in a residential district that would possibly desire.
or that are adjacent to them.
Know that they would be permitted in a residential district that could have an LED message board. For a non-residential, wouldn't be a residential home, residential development, but residential, the schools are on residential property developed for a more business type use. Places of worship, single-family residentially zoned, but developed to for the community. So I think that those types of uses where we would still want to, I believe, allow them as a township. Now, if those uses went away, then of course the sign would have to come into compliance.
So should that be specified in the ordinance? The use of the property determines if you're eligible to have an LED sign?
Well, it says non-residential uses only, not if it was to be ever used as a residential,
All
it
right,
would not be able
use,
to.
not zone, okay.
Yep.
Yep, okay.
So the way you have it proposed, Jody, I mean, that looks good. I would be okay with that. How's the commission feel? Item O.
I would agree with that.
Good.
Item O in total, or just regarding the?
Just the upper piece there, because we already talked through A, B, C, D, E, F.
Right.
So
What about the to be removed part? No flashing, moving, oscillating,
Yeah,
or
that has to be removed or we can't allow the LED board.
right? So
The
that-
flashing,
that has to-
oscillating. We're going to keep the portion that says would be permitted for time and temperature
Okay.
signs that are designed to serve the public rather than advertise, and which must first be approved by the planning commission. I still believe it should come before the commission if they're desiring to have that type of sign.
All right.
I suppose I'll let the rest of the members maybe comment on their thoughts on that section O specifically, not the subsections, but I do want to circle back to the E and F,
Okay?
if I may.
Yes?
Restrict LED signage to allow for a maximum of 32 square feet. We're in opposition to that because some existing LED signs that have been approved are in excess of 32 square feet. That makes sense?
Mhm.
But item F, allow for a permanent sign insert in addition to the LED sign. I guess I'm looking for some clarity. So I'm thinking of the new signs that have been installed in front of public schools. They have a marquee portion that is LED, but there's also additional signage that, states Bedford Public Schools, Bedford High School. Is the intent that we would allow for a permanent sign insert or a permanently affixed sign but the entire structure would not exceed 50 square feet. Is that the intent of this language?
If they propose, like the schools that you're utilizing, that would be part of the signage. So then they would have to decrease the sign of the LED. I'm not in favor of having an insert where you can then do future advertising. If they want to name the facility, especially if it's a multi-unit, and say it's Bedford Shops, and they put Bedford Shops in the address. But an insert to be able to change in and out would be still part of their signage, and then that would be decrease the LED sign, if that makes.
So by sign insert, we're talking about something that can be changed, like a typical marquee where you can put letters, or maybe occupants, tenants, whatever, as the businesses change. That's
Yes.
what we're talking about. Okay, the permanent sign insert language kind of tripped me up because
That's fine.
in nature, the sign insert wouldn't really be permanent. It could be changed, right? I mean, it's not LED. It's so sorry. It's just
No, that's fine. We're providing what was discussed at meetings, and we're just
Yeah.
trying to get clarification.
Okay.
So no apologies
No, I
needed.
think I understand. That
Okay, perfect.
makes sense to me.
So we're good on O.
Yes.
In letter V, the only part we're looking at is that no part of the sign shall be located higher than the lowest point of the roof attached to the wall of the building where the sign is located. We have some locations that have parapet walls that make it above the roof line. That's more of this language. I'm going to use the example tonight. That would not be an example of removing that portion of the language. That is on the roof, and it's not on a wall, if that makes sense. A parapet wall is the extension of the roof line. So when you look at it, the roof will be here. I'm going to use where the liquor cabinet is, Dollar Tree on Secor and Stearns. That has a parapet wall, and those signs all had to come for a sign waiver because they are above the roof line. That would be the intent of that. We can leave it and require them to come for a sign waiver.
So Jody, what are you proposing here?
I'm just proposing that no part of, to remove that the permanent freestanding sign shall be wall signs that must be attached to a wall. But that it can be above the roof line as long as it's attached to the wall.
So you're proposing to remove that statement?
Remove that it cannot be located higher than the lowest point of a roof attached to a wall. I feel if it's attached to a wall and if it's above the roof line, then it should be permitted as a wall sign because it's still on a wall. Some, even like the Ella's tonight, if you have put it on the south side of the structure, it would have been above the roof line where the roof came down on the gable. If it went in that peak part, that would be considered above the roof, where it would still be attached to a wall.
The north side is got a sign above the roof line, correct?
The north side has the sign above the roof line. That is an example of what I'm trying to avoid them to have to come. If it complies by ordinance, by size, if it's attached to a portion of the wall of the structure, I feel that it should be permitted as a wall sign.
Yeah, because you have sometimes when you're building shops and that too, you've got more of a gable front.
Yes.
And here's your eaves trough, but here's your gable front.
Yeah. And you'll even see on this north side of the structure where the liquor cabinet and Dollar Tree are, those all have cabinet inserts that were approved when the building was constructed on that end to allow the signs to be above and in the cabinets that are already existing, because they would have all had to come for a wall sign. Specific sizes in there, though.
Okay. So Jody, if I'm understanding correctly, what you're proposing would be under V in that first sentence, basically to add a period after building and delete the rest of that sentence. Permanent non-freestanding signs shall be wall signs attached to a wall of a building, period.
Yes.
And delete such that no part of the sign shall be located, blah, blah, blah.
Yes.
I'm in favor of that.
And keep in mind, once we make these amendments, we will bring them back for definitely approval to move forward with more language change.
Anyone else? Any comments on that? Heads nodding, thumbs up. Good. All right. Next.
Okay. NW, All freestanding signs shall be landscaped around the entire perimeter of the base, no less than 2 feet wide, and said landscaping shall be kept in a maintained, growing, and healthy condition. What's in blue is what was been discussed, and as a planning department, I support adding some language of stone or mulch or plantings, but I agree with the rendering for the base of the landscaping being required with the submitted building permit for approval to make sure that it is 2 feet wide and that the applicant does know it has to be maintained, whether it's growing or mulched or stone. Most locations maintain that because they don't want their lawnmowers coming close to the sign. Gives a little bit of a buffer for snow plows if they're pushing snow. So, I mean, most locations do maintain it, but however, some do not.
Grass up to the base is not acceptable, correct?
I would say not grass is
lot
not
of-
landscaping.
I'm not complaining, though.
Jody, I think what you have, what's there, and your suggested additions, I would support that. Any comments?
I would be more apt to make it a 3-foot wide space. Because not much plant material will grow in a 2-foot space and look presentable.
Well, you won't be growing things around in that space. It'll be mulch, or you wouldn't be growing in that 2 foot.
Well, they might, but if you go too big, though, then people aren't going to put large plants in because then you start growing above your signage. So I think 2 foot also, because
I guess they could always go bigger.
if somebody might not think about that and they think, oh, I can go 3 feet and put a big old bush in, and later on go, I got to rip that bush out. That was dumb of me because it's going to grow over my sign.
And maybe with the language that's existing, it does say no less than 2 feet.
Right.
I mean, it would be
It's
up
the
to the
minimum.
property
Yeah.
owner, but at least minimally, we need to have 2 feet.
Yeah.
I like the idea of including a rendering of the landscaping with the sign permit. Yep.
I mean, because if they had to come in for that, and if somebody said that doesn't make any sense, the commission could say, no, it's got to be, larger. So that's part of their plan.
Okay.
I think that's all for tonight.
Oh, that was it?
That's why we
I
downsized.
thought we had all this to go.
Nope. That's why in the
Little
memo.
bit at every meeting
That's
now.
why in the memo I put that we were going to start breaking it down so we can get some clear direction. We'll make
That's-
these amendments. I'll bring a couple more sections back because the language is very cumbersome. It's
Yep.
lengthy. So I think if we focus, get a clear direction, that gives us the opportunity then to amend those sections in red. And then when they come back, you'll know exactly what we've all come to consensus with.
Jody,
Good approach.
just,
Thank you, guys.
just for some incentive, and just off the top of your head, about how many ordinances do you think we need to do this to?
To do this too,
To go through, scrub them, try to tweak them?
the development design standards is definitely one. We will be working closely with Manick & Smith on that as well because they do our reviews. But the development design standards definitely needs to, and it has needed it for years because it states in there that I'm just going to use that we don't permit the PVC piping, but the Drain Commission allows for it. So it's not under our jurisdiction. We have a blanket waiver from the Township Board that allows developers to come in and not have to seek that waiver every time. That's just an example. Sidewalks, the size of sidewalks has changed, those types of things, and that's all part of the development design standards. We've had discussions with the building department on fences and maybe starting to require a plot plan and a permit for that to at least ensure that they're installed properly. We've had a lot of complaints and concerns with residents of fences being installed improperly. Some don't. The good side, I guess, the posts have to be inside the fence. Tarps, those types of things are not permitted for fencing material. So we would like to maybe change that and require at least a plot plan and a permit review and to make sure that everyone is understanding how a fence needs to be installed. Corner lots become cumbersome with fences, 3.5 feet in the front yard, and you have 2 front yards from the road right of way on each section of your home. So those are things, that we can start enforcing. Fences would be a concern. Of course, the sign.
So in other words, maybe 5, give or take, high priority. Okay.
Lots to do.
So and
High priority, yes.
The reason I asked that is, I think we've had a great meeting tonight with great discussion with this board, and I think don't want to do anything hasty because we don't want to do something and then say, well, what were we thinking? We shouldn't have done it that way. But I think maybe getting this much interest, if we say, okay, guys, we've got this many sections to go in this. Let's get this done because we need to move on to the next one. And the more interest that we take in it as this commission and move on to the next one and tweak that in 1 or 2 meetings or so, because honestly, if we have meetings, sometimes once a month, and that's not a lot. So if we can get through these things, and just for your information, Mr. Andrews, if Jody doesn't have something that somebody's paying for the application to come in, we don't have a meeting. So she won't just schedule something like this just because we need to talk about it, because there's no revenue to offset the commission members' fees. So I'd like to get these things moving and tweak them as quickly as we can, but think about as much as we can ahead of time and make sure that we give her good guidance between her and Katrina, and of course Manick and Smith where needed, and if legal's needed in there, we can make these things move quicker. Because honestly, again, there's probably 4 or 5 top priorities in ordinance that we need to make some changes to. I guarantee there's probably another 15 or 20 out there that should be changed. Some of it's just because nobody's fault. It's just they're obsolete. They were written 15, 20 years ago, and we just don't have a ton of manpower to constantly keep up with the times. And, if we had a dedicated person to sit and go through these constantly, that'd be a different story. So we want to try to do as much as we can without burdening, the planning department. Because, obviously, when we have applicants come in, that's their first priority, and revamping this stuff is second. So, again, great conversation tonight, and I think we can make some real positive changes on these ordinances with Jody and Katrina going forward.
Yep. Good. Thank you, Mr. Stenner. Good, Jody? Is that enough on the sign ordinance discussion?
I think that's good for the sign ordinance tonight. Thank you, everyone, for definitely giving clarification and great discussion on it.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to item number 9, public comment. And there is no public comment at this time, so we'll move on to information, item number 10.
We possibly will be having another meeting on the 25th in 2 weeks. I will keep everyone informed. Usually you'll see that email come out, and I know this is information most of you know that I tried to send that out either Wednesday or Thursday before the meeting so you know whether it's canceled. But we do have some items that are close to being ready. Otherwise, we will be discussing the signs some more, either that meeting or the first meeting in February. Also, Planning Department had a meeting with the Finance Department and the clerk today regarding the CIP, Capital Improvement Plan. And Friday, we are having a meeting. Mr. Mahoney and Mr. Crowrett are going to be attending the meeting Friday in the township, and we will be getting some more information together. That will be coming back for some information to keep it moving forward, getting more clear defined of the assets. We'll be appointing some department heads to make sure that all those assets are accounted for, and then looking at that to be a 5-year program on top of the one that was already approved. More defined information in this packet that will come. So we are working on getting that. Other than that, everyone have a good evening.
Thank you. We'll move on to commission staff comment. Mr. Lankowski.
I'm good.
Mr. Steiner.
Just welcome Mr. Andrews to the board.
Mr. Andrews.
And thank you all for the warm welcome.
We scare you away?
Not yet.
There's nothing more exciting than sign discussion. Lots of it. Jody, before I forget, I will be traveling on the 25th. I have an annual planning meeting, so I will be out of town that day. Welcome to the Planning Commission. Glad to have you. Thank you for your support, everyone. I appreciate it, and looking forward to working with you guys another year. Mr. Mahoney.
I'd just like to say thanks to Jody and Katrina for getting this capital improvement plan, the train rolling again. It's going to be a big, valuable tool for the township, I think, and I'm looking forward to working with you guys. Congratulations, Tom, on becoming chair, and Joe for becoming secretary. Welcome, Grant. It's good to meet you. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Andrews.
Thank you.
And everybody else, we got another year. Looking good.
Yep. Mr. Helm.
Thanks for the good discussion tonight, and welcome, Mr. Anders.
I have nothing.
That's it. All right. Unless there's any objections, meeting is adjourned.
It's nighttime. Cemetery. My handler's out.